Namaskar. Welcome to the fifth episode of Satya Samvad. Diving into the age-old question of what's real and what's not is like embarking on a journey through the mysteries of the universe itself. It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands, isn't it? We've been pondering this conundrum for centuries, trying to wrap our minds around the essence of reality. When we gaze upon the world around us, we see the trees swaying, the roads bustling, buildings towering, and the crowds drifting lazily across the sky. It all seems undeniably real, doesn't it? Yet, as we delve deeper into the realm of modern science, we stumble upon this fascinating interplay between the solid ground of objective reality and the nebulous realm of probability. Take quantum field theory, for instance. It's like peering through a kaleidoscope into the fabric of reality itself. We are confronted with this beautiful tapestry of probabilistic elements, like the dance of chance in a quantized free Klein-Gordon field, for instance. It's as if reality itself is playing a game of dice behind the curtains of existence. Now let's flip the script and journey into the rich tapestry of Indian knowledge systems. Here we find ourselves immersed in centuries of profound contemplation on the nature of existence itself. While these insights have often been couched in metaphysical musings, there's a resonance with the cutting-edge explorations of modern science. What's truly fascinating is how modern science is steering away from the rigid confines of reductionism and absoluteness. It's like breaking free from the shackles of a predetermined script and moving into uncharted territories. We are redefining our understanding of space, time, forces, and even the very laws that govern our universe. And here we are at the crossroads of ancient wisdom and modern inquiry, ready to embark on this journey of discovery. And today we have with us Professor Sisir Roy, who is joining us, and we look forward to having this exploration with rigor, integrity, and drive. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Professor Sisir Roy is currently working as a senior Homi Bhabha Fellow and a visiting professor at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. He's a theoretical physicist, having spent more than 30 years in physics and applied mathematics unit at the Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, and joined as Raman Pai Chair Professor at NIAS in Bangalore. He has been a vocal spokesperson for the interface of various elements of contemporary science as well as Indian knowledge systems. And we look forward to having a nourishing and a meaningful interaction today as we go along. So, sir, to begin with, we have discussed in the past in various events about the central aspect of the Indian knowledge system, which comes with consciousness, or Chit, as has been mentioned in the Rig Veda, that is at the heart of Sanatan Dharma. And it is this idea that reality ultimately is Satchitanand, or truth, consciousness, and bliss. But you know, it's interesting how consciousness is still this elusive thing, even in modern science. We have got folks like Giulio Tononi trying to wrap their heads around it, proposing models like integrated information theory. Then there's this intriguing connection between quantum mechanics and consciousness. So for instance, back in the day, in 1960s, Ricciardi and Umezawa tried to link the mental states to quantum fields. And in 2006, Erwin Laszlo got people thinking with his paper on quantum vacuum and consciousness. You and Ralph Abraham as well have got your take on consciousness rooted in this very concept of the quantum vacuum. Can you please tell us a little about this?
Let me first thank to Mrittunjoy because of the very, very fascinating questions, not only among quantum physicists, but among the other people in the community as a whole, in different branches of science, like biology, neurobiology, or some other, even chemistry. They are becoming more and more interested. So we started with the fact that at the very bottom level, like, you know, in the Planck level, is the smallest unit of length and smallest unit of time. Beyond that, it seems that there is no concept of space, time, and causality. So the issue of 21st century is how the space-time, as we perceive in the ordinary world or objective world, is continuous. And principle of causality is one of the pillars in modern science. So how this continuity of space-time emerge from a substratum where there is no concept of space, time, and causality. We proposed that there is a kind of network among the discrete points, apparently which do not have a connections. And we consider it as a kind of network using graph theory that these discrete points, they come together and form like a Lorentz attractor, so that at a certain level, they are disconnected and discrete, but at the some other level, say macroscopic world, the continuity comes because of the self-organizing property. Okay, so at the microscopic level, there is a network which organizes and gives rise to the macroscopic network. And we can think of a space like Euclidean space and time also. So this self-organizing property is very, very striking property. Even if you consider the Latin root of the word intelligent, the Latin root is intel and legere, means grouping together. So here, space seems to be itself intelligent. But the issue with the consciousness is that we do not know the definition of consciousness yet. I mean, we the scientists, maybe the philosophers, they have their own definition. But what we do, we work with the functionality of consciousness. So we try to show that from underlying this spatial network, we can develop two networks. One is a kind of discrete model which describes the body, what is mean by body and mind issue, and another is digital to analog kind of network which we associate with mind. So here consciousness is a kind of epiphenomenon. I mean, the scientists are more or less, most of the scientists, they believe, of course, they are from angle of neuroscience, that is a kind of epiphenomenon. But here we started with a fundamental network issue, and out of which we can have a single network connecting both body and mind.
Right, sir. And so when we're talking about the quantum vacuum itself, there are obviously questions around the conceptualization of the quantum vacuum in the sense that how it correlates with this notion of emptiness. So for instance, quantum vacuum state challenges the notion of emptiness. It is far from a simple void, as we know. Instead, this vacuum state teems with a number of different kinds of fleeting electromagnetic waves and particles that continuously pop into and out of existence with the quantum field itself. Brahman in Vedanta, for instance, on the other hand, speaks of the entirely indescribable and devoid of all manner of objects and constructs when he talks about the fundamental reality of the universe. So how then can we posit that the quantum vacuum could be the underlying basis of the universe as we speak of it in the Bharatiya traditions?
Yeah, this is a very, very interesting question, of course. Quantum vacuum, as we understand in physics nowadays, it is not devoid of anything, but it's full of all kinds of possibilities. Say, for example, if you consider the virtual particles, all the virtual particles, they pop up and absorb. So this quantum vacuum or substratum has a kind of fluctuation too because of the Heisenberg uncertainty relation. So the issue is whether this fluctuation is outside of the vacuum. If it is outside the vacuum, then there is two realities. But we think this fluctuation is within the vacuum. So not it is beyond the vacuum. It is like, Spanda in Kashmiri Shaivism. But the issue is still different in the sense that in case of quantum vacuum, we have a concept of geometry, we have a concept of space and time. On the other hand, if you look at the Indian tradition, especially, as I mentioned, Kashmiri Shaivism, when we consider Spanda, they called it kinchit chalanam, little movement, but no concept of space and time. So according to them, it's a kind of logical construct. So frankly speaking, we don't understand yet what is this Spanda means in case of the ultimate substratum.
Right, right. And it's still a project or a work in progress. I mean, there are many different elements of it. As we were discussing a while back about the whole idea of how Spandan, how Spotavad, for instance, the idea of pulsation, the idea of vibrations as well, how that can kind of, connect to the various modern scientific ideas that we have either in quantum mechanics or elsewhere as well. So now let's talk about Nagarjuna and his dual reality framework, because it connects to what you just mentioned in a manner of speaking. And conventional reality versus ultimate reality. There is this debate that goes on across the various works of Nagarjuna. And it is almost like peeling back layers of an onion, right? Ultimate reality, according to Nagarjuna, is all about this core of emptiness, right? The idea that objects lack an inherent property or an inherent kind of characterization of sorts, but they're not floating in a vacuum, no pun intended, but they're all interconnected. They're reliant on each other. And so you mentioned about category theory when you talked about Nagarjuna and this idea of interconnectedness. And I myself have looked into that, as we have discussed in the past. We've had some discussions on this. And it is a fascinating area where we are bringing in the understanding of the objectivity of consciousness with the mathematical tools of category theory. So could you please tell us a little about this?
Yeah, before that, I mean, you raised first very serious questions like they consider two kinds of reality. One is conventional reality, Vyavaharik Satya, another is Paramarthik Satya, for ultimate reality. But in science, we don't have such kind of concept. What do you mean by ultimate reality in science? We don't know. So for us, it is a big issue. And what you told about interconnectedness, yes. What Nagarjuna and other Buddhist scholars, they consider interconnectedness, or there is a kind of relation or transformation or mapping. Okay. So that interconnectedness is very much depicted in quantum physics in terms of the non-local correlations between the two entities. So these correlations or relations, this is fundamental and considered by Buddhist philosophers, starting from Nagarjuna. But one fundamental issue is still there. I will be coming to category theory just a few minutes later. Before that, I can tell you that according to Dharmakirti, the famous Buddhist logician in 8th century, I think, he wrote a book called Sambandha Pariksha, examination of the relation. And a lot of debate started among Naiyics, Hindu philosophers, Jain philosophers, etc. But according to Dharmakirti, the relation is not real in the ultimate analysis. So if the relation is not real, then what we call quantum correlations or non-local correlation, that should not be also considered as real according to Buddhist philosophy. But up till now, a lot of lab experiments, also the quantum teleportation among the satellites and the Earth object has been done already by Chinese people and others. And as it is experimentally verified in lab, we say they are real. Now the issue is how far our understanding regarding Buddhist philosophy, that ultimately it is not real. This gives rise to a lot of, suspicions among our own about our own understanding. Unless we understand what is meant by ultimate reality, probably this cannot be resolved. On the other hand, there are some other aspects. I can tell you, the debate between Dharmakirti, Bhartihari, and Prabhachandra, that Jain logicians, Prabhachandra, he attacked from a different angle. He told that that interconnectedness or relation between two objects, if there has to be this kind of things, then the object must have a kind of propensity among themselves. So Prabhachandra used the term propensity, which was absent in case of Dharmakirti. And we have similar things in quantum physics. Say, consider Pauli's exclusion principle. You know that two electrons cannot stay in the same state. Suppose you consider one German physicist came to India long before. Then I was a student like you, and he asked me, Sisir, I consider a kind of jar, and there is one electron inside the jar. Now, I'm trying to send another electron from outside the jar. So how does this electron in the outside knows that there is someone inside the jar? Pauli's exclusion principle is a mystic principle. And probably this kind of propensity can be related, but I don't know. Even, in Pauli, in his Nobel lecture, he told that I don't understand my own principle. Maybe you need more fundamental physics to understand it. So this lot of this kind of debate we can think of between our traditional wisdom, Buddhist and Hindu philosophy, and the very forefront research of modern quantum mechanics.
So, sir, I mean, going back to the idea of category theory, if you could tell us a little about how you have been writing. I mean, what are the aspects of it that you have used?
Yeah, because the category theory says that if you consider a category of sets, and the category theory says that we are concerned with morphisms or mappings among the objects, but we are not concerned about the content of the object. So, I mean, on the one hand, this is advantage. Another hand, it is disadvantage, because if I think in terms of category theory, everything, then it is very difficult to say whether this is a category of elephants or category of elementary particles. Okay. So our approach was that as category theory concerned with the mappings or morphism, not with the object itself, then everything in this universe, the objects are interconnected by mappings. So this is like interconnectedness, what Nagarjuna thought of.
Right. And you have brought us to a very important point and the central point, so to say, which is that quantum physics has brought this ancient Bharati idea to the fore of the concept of correlations, right? The concept of quantum entanglement and correlations. And for our viewers, these are like the glue that holds the universe together, in a manner of speaking. Collisions of high energy particles, for instance, at the smallest of scales, produce jets. And recently it was seen that these jets also display entanglement of sorts. So correlations as a concept is central to Dharmic traditions. And being aware of where to draw the line, of course, between science and philosophy, it is nonetheless mind-boggling as to how the ancient philosophies anticipated this very strange and interesting aspect of quantum mechanics, whereby the interconnectedness is hardwired. It's more fundamental, as you rightly put. So could you please walk us through how you think we came to this proposition, and again, going back to the idea of the fundamental reality of the universe, how it plays such an important role in that?
Before that, I mean, one thing my mind is perplexing on one thing. I can tell you that even when David Mermin in Itacha School of Quantum Theory, he proposed that there is a kind of correlation is more fundamental, and correlation or non-local correlation exists among the objects at the microscopic scale. So, but as you are a person working deeply involved in quantum theory, the issue is that even if you consider a kind of EPR situation, Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen situation, there you need a kind of measurement, because a preparation is also kind of measurement. So you are preparing, when you are saying that you're preparing a state between two electrons together, so that is also kind of measurement. And then you are separating the two electrons to larger and larger distance. Now, the few issues are very serious, like one electron and one proton, they don't have non-local correlations. one proton and one photon, light quanta, they don't have such kind of correlations. So two things, bothering me, that what our ancient wisdom, when they say that even in Vedanta, that minds are connected, what does it mean? Here, a group of entities, they are connected, not every object, every entity.
Right,
so,
right.
Is there anything we need to understand more the ancient wisdom, or it is not really, they are not analogous way we can think of? Is
Right.
it something wrong?
Yeah. I wonder, sir, that if you were to think about this whole idea of entanglement and decoherence, for instance, where different kinds of particles have this tendency almost to get correlated, right? And instead of thinking of this idea of building block of universe being fundamental, rather than that, if you were to think of this tendency as more fundamental, this aspect of this correlation formation, so to say, which is also seen in decoherence when they lose, the system loses its quantumness. Do you think that could be a manner of looking at it? I mean, rather than from the object-oriented aspect to a more functional and process-oriented or tendency-oriented picture or perspective into this?
No, you are right, because this is the proposition made by Prabhachandra, Jain logician. He told we have to consider that they have a kind of propensity,
right,
tendency to form a relation.
Right.
Even in contrast to Buddhist philosophy, or even Bhartahari and other Hindu philosophy, Naiyayic philosophy too. So this is very important.
Right. And so, yeah, please.
I was looking for Prabhachandra's paper, but it's very difficult to get English translation of the original text.
Right. And that actually a little bit of a detour. I mean, when we talk about this whole interface of Indian knowledge systems and modern science, I think one of the major problems that comes is that we need to have people who are extremely well versed with various tools that relate to the two sides. And I think that is something where we sometimes are lacking. I mean, in not only in terms of the ideas on the scientific side, but also, as you said, the accessibility of texts. When it comes to the various logicians, mathematicians, scholars, right? Their workings and their writings have not been yet deciphered, has not been understood beyond a point. And of course, there is this very interesting dual aspect of what they say, right? There is a poetic aspect, and there is something which is more hidden, but could be more literal in a certain manner of speaking, right? So where do we draw the line between the two, I think is a very important aspect. So how do you think we can go forward when we talk about modern science and Indian knowledge systems, right? And doing it systematically, doing it in a proper way, not going into pseudo-science, going at it in a very, a truthful manner with integrity, right? How do we do that? Yeah.
I mean, we need a group of dedicated traditional scholars who can interact with us from their knowledge in the first-hand knowledge, not they have a kind of secondary or tertiary knowledge. Because if I want to look into it, I'll go through secondary or tertiary knowledge.
Right.
Sometimes it diluted the thing, sometimes distortion is there.
Yes.
But we scientists, scientists who are deeply involved or very serious, we can contact them, or we can make a kind of group with the serious scientists and what are the issues. Because as I told you, that a kind of procedure or measurement is needed to make a joint state or a composite state, and then we consider we have a kind of manifestation of non-local correlation. So what they mean in our ancient knowledge system, whether they also consider analogous manner, or when they say that minds are connected,
right,
or pratitya samutpada in Buddhist philosophy.
Absolutely. And I think I'll come to that point you mentioned about how the tertiary texts often kind of misrepresent almost what is being said, because it has been often written from a certain biased perspective. For instance, for the longest time, we had many Indologists as well as many people who were supposedly scholars, but were coming from a Western kind of mindset with a Western perspective in mind. Even today, we see that people are looking more towards validation in the Western context or fitting in the Western ideas within the Indian context, right? It's not necessarily going from scratch, going with rigor, and trying to see where things actually stand all the way, right? So that is something I'll discuss in one of the subsequent points of discussion. But before that, space-time and causality, right? They are the bricks and mortar, so to say, of modern physics. Yeah. And they emerged from after the Big Bang and literally shaped the very fabric of our universe. And in dharmic traditions, we have the idea of consciousness, of course. But we also have a very interesting manner in one of the traditions, which is Sankhya, for instance, where there is the subtle elements and then the grosser elements, the tanmatras. And before that, there are various other levels as well, Mahat, Ahankara, and so on and so forth. But we come to the subtle elements and then the grosser elements. But we also come to this idea of space-time and causality also, which is hardwired into the way of thinking. And it relates to consciousness again. So how do you see us looking at space-time and causality as very specific concepts with this broader stream of understanding consciousness and the Indian knowledge system, so to say?
Yeah, at first, you use the terminology called subtle elements and gross elements, sukshma and sthula.
Yes.
In science, we don't understand. We don't differentiate between the two. But in ancient knowledge system, in all the knowledge system, all kinds of knowledge system, they use the two concepts, sthula and sukshma. We need to understand. We need to talk more to the traditional scholar, whether we have analogous things happen in modern science.
Right.
I don't know whether people are clear about that.
I think there was this proposition by Peter Hagelin, I think, at the Maharishi University, when he tried to put forward the idea of the field, right, and the excitations as the subtle and the grosser kind of aspect of things. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the various fields that are there in quantum field theory were posited as aspects of tanmatras or aspects of the subtler side of the elements, and then moving forward with defining the grosser elements in terms of the excitations thereof, right? So there are some of these studies which have been done in the past.
Again, I differ using the concept of field, quantum field. The problem is that, people in the beginning, they seem it is a very attracting concept, and we might have related to understanding consciousness.
Yes.
But for any kind of field, electromagnetic or any kind of field, you need a kind of structured geometric notion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Minkowskian or any other kind of. And whenever you consider a structured geometric notion, I mean, it cannot be connected with the pure consciousness in Indian traditions.
Right.
You can think of a field as it has infinite degrees of freedom. That's why you can think it might be related with pure consciousness. On the other hand, in Indian tradition, when they speak of pure consciousness, they don't have any kind of the geometric notions or structured space-time itself. So there is a big challenge.
Right.
And also the excitations of the field, there is a quanta. Again, they are, physically detected, say photon or like electrons, they are, because at the level of quantum field, there is no concept of particle or field, only quanta and field.
Right. Absolutely.
And those can be detected through lab experiments.
Right. So, sir, within physics itself, there are two kind of movements of sorts that comes to mind. One is that of, you just mentioned about mathematical kind of structures being more primary, and then the definition of fields in terms of that. Now, Max Tegmark at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology speaks about the mathematical universe, right? The class 4 mathematical structures are the fundamental reality of sorts. And we have to define everything in terms of mathematics to begin with, in the fundamental sense, and then we move forward to other lower order kind of structures, mathematical class 3, 2, and 1, and so on, right? So that is one. then we have this growing kind of awareness or growing kind of movement of sorts in the idea of information being more primary than, let's say, mass and energy and various other elements, which we have taken till now as primary. And of course, Leonard Susskind, among others, have been proposing this, have been taking forward this idea. And it also relates to entanglement, because there was this recent paper which talks about how entanglement relates with space-time itself. If you talk about ADS-CFT, then there is this theory where the entanglement at the boundary can be the reason for the gravitational motion and the space-time dynamics, essentially, in the bulk, right? So there is mathematical aspect and the information theoretic aspect. So how do you see these movements, and how does it connect with the Indian knowledge system ideas, if it does at all?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is very deep, because the first one, the mathematics and laws of physics, whether the number theory or kind of mathematics, they are like laws of nature, or they are more fundamental than that. I mean, laws of nature, say gravitation or electromagnetic field or those kind of forces. So mathematics is as fundamental as that, or it's a creation of human mind. This debate is going on. We don't know what is the future of this debate. We physicists, we think that laws of nature, gravitational field or other conservation laws, they are like more fundamental. And information, I tell you one thing which most of the people, they try to avoid, even Tononi himself. I wrote Tononi many times, but he is very skeptic. He does not like to answer it. When you say information, but there is no information theory exists up till now which gives rise, which is associated with the semantic aspect. You know, some stimulus is coming from Apple, and after processing in the brain, at a certain point we say, oh, this is Apple. So this is semantic aspect. And starting from Fisher information theory, which is called mother of all information measures, Shannon or other kinds of things, they don't have any semantic aspect. But brain, anyhow, when they interpret, I mean, brain not only process information, but it interprets also. So that is semantic aspect.
Right.
So unless we have a measurement information theory which has a semantic aspect, I do agree with Shannon that probably it won't be applicable to understanding living organisms.
Right. So one wonders whether, I mean, in physics, we have the gluons, for instance, right, in quantum dynamics, and they do have a higher order gluonic kind of interaction. So you can make, for instance, in the Feynman diagram, you have these, nested kind of loops of gluons, right? So they can be by themselves centers of the color kind of interaction of the gluonic kind of interaction. So one wonders, I mean, just an idea or a thought that came to mind when you were just discussing about the semantic aspect. What if we have not looked at reflexive structures in the sense of, just like in the case of the gluon, if the mediating aspect itself is also the center of further kind of higher order action or higher order agency or interactions, can that be a possibility of looking at information as more reflexive, as more interpretive, essentially by definition?
No, I am talking about how to construct information measures.
Right, right.
So, well, what you're saying, this might give us, but how to construct that? Mathematically construct information measure. Say, if you consider the simplest one, Shannon one, there is no such semantic aspect associated with information.
Yeah, at the moment, I think it's not sufficient. It's definitely not sufficient. I'm just positing what could be an extension, and wanting to know your thoughts on that. Yeah.
And one thing, as you raised the issue in case of gluonic structure, one thing also, I wonder about one thing. If you consider a case of quark itself, so quark scientists are trying to develop a theory why quark cannot be detected outside. I mean, how they are confined, this is the way people are thinking. So is it somehow, can you think that way, that an object which is not observable in that sense, only in direct way. We can consider a kind of reality, which we consider in case of Indic wisdom.
Mhm. I think it goes back to Murray Gell-Mann and the whole idea of the strong forces and everything, the manner in which it came about, the experiments that happened, 1950s, 60s, 70s, of course, and how they came about with this idea of interactions and interaction-based picture. So for our viewers, the way, I mean, physics undertakes this is obviously with respect to different kinds of experiments, which characterize different, aspects. I mean, for instance, with calorimetry, or with different kinds of flavor-based or color-based kind of experiments. And based on that, one can discern or not, essentially, whether there is some kind of structuring within a certain element, let's say, right? So, of course, those questions are very much there. In fact, there is a theory which talks about entanglement of quarks and how the maximal entanglement structure can be one of the reasons why you don't see, quarks by themselves, and they're, quite strongly bound together, right? Not to be able to go out by themselves into nature as such. So that's an interesting thought, which has been going on for a while. Now, going back to the point which you mentioned about tertiary texts and how the interpretation really matters, how one should go to the primary text and not kind of rely on tertiary texts. So there has been the talk on Tattvas. Tattvas in Shaivism, of course, we have Tattvas inclusive of consciousness as well as material existence. Within Sankhya, we have the 25 Tattva system, which concerns mostly with the tangible aspects of creation, theorizing that Prakriti is a source of the world of becoming. But in today's world, Tattvas often get misunderstood because I personally feel we are in a haste to kind of connect the dots with what we have in science, in modern science itself, especially when it comes to Akash Tattva, which is often the most inaccessible in many different discussions, so to say. So some folks mistake it as a debunked ether of old physics, which was debunked in the famous Michelson-Morley experiment, for instance. But as per the treatises of Indian knowledge systems, Akash is more than just that. I mean, it is a canvas upon which very fundamental kind of, you could call it vibrations, you could call it, the very starting of empirical manifestation, so to say. And so Tattvas, how do you read Tattvas, or how do you look into Tattvas, and how do you see us taking this idea forward, given all these realities that I just highlighted?
Yeah, even in, as you mentioned, the Akash Tattva. Akash has different layers of Akash, that Chidakash, Bhutakash, like there are different type of Akash. And quality, secondary quality of Akash is nothing but space. So no matter, no object is there at that layer of reality, which we call Akasha. Because then from Akasha, different layers of reality, which we call different elements, come out.
Right.
So Akasha may be a fundamental substratum, like Chidakash, or maybe Chittakash. And Bhutakash is maybe considered with the usual object. So
right.
We have to very analytic to think of what is Akasha and what are the elements which are coming out of the Akasha and how they are combining each other to produce everything in this physical universe.
Right. And so, sir, I mean, Tattvas, for instance, when we talk about Tattvas, it is very easy to kind of talk about it in terms of the elements we see in nature. I mean, for instance, we know that, I mean, Jal, Prithvi, Vayu, Agni, and Akasha, right? I mean, is it really the elements as we see it, or is there a possibility of having it as something more than that? Because if it is to be something which is composing the entirety of the universe in terms of the various elements that are out there, right, the various objects that are out there, it has to be something more fundamental, essentially, right? Yeah. So people have posited, again, Hagelin, for instance, Professor Hagelin has mentioned that there is this aspect of heat and luminosity, of course, right, which comes with electromagnetism and so on and so forth. And then there is the aspect of firmness, right, or something which kind of holds its ground in a manner of speaking, and that relates to certain kinds of forces and elements in nature at the fundamental level. So how do you read Tattvas, the idea, the concept of Tattvas, right, and see the correlation that we try to establish with modern kind of elements?
I mean, when they say Prithvi Tattva,
Yeah.
I mean art. So the finer aspect is that which has kind of resistivity or cohesivity.
Right.
So this kind of property you have to think over before considering the usual element which are there. These are the more fundamental aspect.
Right. And possibly it was to connect with these tendencies or properties that the names were given as such. But it obviously has much bigger import, and there has been extensive work on this, including with your writings. And I would like to share with our viewers about some of them as well.
Yeah.
Now,
let me tell you, one very deep thinker, mathematician, he's a category theorist. He passed away maybe 1 year before or 2 years before. He considered the space is connected with cohesivity property. And there are two extremes when there is motion without cohesion. And there is another extreme that is cohesion without motion. But again, if you probably he was not aware of Indian knowledge systems, when we say Prithvi, it's connected with cohesivity or kind of resistivity or rigidity, we consider. And Akash consider a space without cohesivity, but he considered the opposite way. Maybe we have to look into his, he's a mathematician and very deep thinker. We have to think what he understands.
Connected to this idea of tattvas is, of course, we cannot deny the preeminence of gunas, right? The gunas, as we talk about it in the
Indian this is closely related with gunas.
Closely related with gunas. So in that, people have mentioned that the rajasic and the tamasic, right? They have posited it in terms of the aspect of perturbation or activity for the rajasic, and then the idea of cohesion, the idea of resistivity, as you mentioned, with the tamasic. But the question that still remains is, what is the sattvic guna, essentially, if you were to talk about it in terms of physics, in terms of the empirical world, because it is as important, if not more, that as the other ones, right, for the composition of different kinds of elements, as per Sankhya and various other traditions of Indian knowledge systems. So how do you see the sattva guna as we know it?
According to text, you know that they have a very complex combinations of different kind of elements with different type of gunas. 1/3, 1/5, 1/7, this way consider it. But if you consider Shakti guna, I don't know what it corresponds to correspond to modern physics itself.
Right.
And again, the problem is that according to Rig Veda, I mean the ultimate reality Brahman, people consider that it's a dynamic equilibrium of Sattva, Tama, and Raja.
Right.
Okay. And how there is kind of perturbations so that the universe being manifested.
Right.
That's the issue regarding the origin of creation itself.
Right. And it brings very fundamental questions. For instance, if the temporal aspect was not even defined, then perturbation in what and of what? Right. Then there are also aspects about why the 3 and not more, or not some other number, right? There are many such aspects and elements of thought which have to be kind of, one could take it as an axiomatic kind of, element. But then you could also ask these very fundamental metaphysical questions. So finally, coming to the idea, please.
An American Indologist.
Yes.
He wrote a book. The name of the book is Dynamic Stillness. He is, of course, he's a scholar in Kashmiri Shaivism, but dynamic stillness, again, we know the dynamic equilibrium in physics.
So there was a lovely discussion around various aspects of tattvas, of the elements of reality as we know it, in the context of Indian knowledge systems and contemporary science. One of the major things that comes to mind is that of mind and mindfulness, which is very important in the modern context. And it is this very idea of the mind, of consciousness, that makes the Indian knowledge systems something that is inherently humanitarian, that inherently tries to or looks forward towards looking at this direction of correlations, of how we correlate with our environment, for instance, how we correlate with each other as well. So not only is this an important aspect of metaphysics and philosophy, but also of the social dynamics of contemporary times and for all times for that matter. So with this, we would like to close this discussion, the 5th episode of Satya Samvad, and look forward to having you in the next one. Namaskar.